Welcome all of you to British Heart Foundation Scotland's 60th birthday event. I'm James Jopling, the head of BHF Scotland, and I'm delighted to be joining you here today on one of the days of our 60th birthday year. We wanted to take some time with the people who are closest to BHF here in Scotland to recognise the progress we've all made and to reflect on the challenges ahead. And those people most important to us are all of you on this video call, so thank you so much for joining us. That we're doing this virtually is due to what we've all come through in one of the most challenging years that many of us can remember. And during that time, British Heart Foundation has continued to invest in world-leading research right here in Scotland. But we, like so many other charities, have felt the impact of our shops having to shut and our fundraising events having to pause for so many months. We'll be hearing shortly from our Chief Exec, Dr. Charmaine Griffiths, and later from Professor Nick Mills from our University of Edinburgh Centre for Research Excellence, who will speak to you more about the progress we've made over those last 60 years. And we'll hear some pre-recorded talks too from some of my BHF Scotland colleagues, who will let you know more about some of our successes that have happened right here. First, a little bit of housekeeping for you. You can ask questions as we go, and Nick Mills will be joining us at the end to answer some of those live using the chat function you'll see to the right of the video. And if we can't get to your question today, we'll make a note of who you are and get back to you if we can. So if you can use your full name, that would really help us. If you can keep those questions clean and concise, that would also be fantastic. And if your internet connection pauses for any reason, if you refresh the screen first off, you should be able to get back to us quickly. And just to let you know, the whole event will be replayed roughly an hour after we end for everybody. So if you've joined late or want to watch anything again, please feel free to do so. Over the last 60 years, the British Heart Foundation has been instrumental in countless life-saving discoveries. Our research has contributed to the first UK heart transplant, the development of pacemakers, the use of clot-busting drugs to treat heart attacks, and the rollout of genetic testing for inherited heart conditions. Research has given us machines that can restart hearts, the ability to fix tiny arteries in babies, the power to give someone a heart they weren't born with, and so much more. Back in the 1960s, the decade we were founded, 7 out of 10 heart attacks in the UK were fatal. Now, in part, thanks to that research that we helped fund and you helped fund, at least 7 out of 10 of those people survive. Our research links in Scotland are strong and demonstrate the huge breadth of talent within the scientific community here, and I'm delighted that some of our scientific colleagues are joining us this evening. 2 of our 6 centres of research excellence are here in Scotland, and we support more than 300 staff across 6 institutions right here. We're supporting people at early stages in their career, people we hope to go on to become global leaders of research in the future. Back in 1964, Europe's first coronary care unit was set up in Edinburgh Royal Infirmary by the BHF's former medical director, Professor Dr. Desmond Julian. He pioneered the idea of coronary care units, hospital wards for specialised care of heart patients. His work transformed care for heart patients worldwide. If you'll excuse the pun, in Scotland, we've very much been at the heart of so much of the work that BHF has done to save and change lives. And we've only been able to do that because of the efforts of everyone with us on this call tonight. So I can't thank all of you enough, but let me do it again. Thank you. You'll now hear from my colleague Richard Forsyth and Francis Divers about the progress for patients in the last 60 years, from Annie Cunningham and colleagues about the importance of our retail activity. And let me introduce our first speaker, the Chief Executive Officer of British Heart Foundation, Dr. Charmaine Griffiths.
Thank you, James, and a huge welcome to everyone. It's just wonderful to have you join us and see so many people come together today to celebrate the BHF's 60th birthday. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all very much for everything you do on behalf of the BHF and BHF Scotland, and the fantastic sums of money that you have raised for the BHF over the past 6 decades. It truly is phenomenal. Thank you. And for a moment, let's take our minds back to 1961, when the BHF was founded. And sadly, over half of all deaths in the UK were from cardiovascular disease. And tragically, many people suffering a heart attack didn't even get to hospital. And at that time, sudden death at the age of 50 or 60 was considered just a fact of life. But there were those people who fought this view, who believed they could make a difference. And so, in 1961, some doctors joined forces with philanthropists to found the BHF. And at that time, 7 out of 10 heart attacks in the UK were fatal. And today, 60 years later, in part because of research that you've helped us fund, 7 out of 10 people survive. And likewise, around that time, the majority of babies born with a complex congenital heart condition died tragically before their first birthday. But today, thanks to research, more than 8 out of 10 babies born with congenital heart disease grow up to be adults. And in Scotland, that's around 30 babies a month who are diagnosed with a congenital heart defect. And our BHF research links in Scotland have run deep for 60 years and are strong today and demonstrate the huge breadth of talent within the scientific community here. 2 of our 6 BHF Centres of Research Excellence are based in Scotland at the Universities of Edinburgh and of Glasgow. And we're very proud to support more than 300 research staff in institutions across Scotland, many of whom are at the earliest stages of their careers. And in 2020, during the pandemic, of course, we saw many of our researchers join the global fight against COVID, undertaking work to find out more about its effects on people with heart and circulatory diseases. And these included 3 BHF professors and their teams at our 2 Centres of Research Excellence. And of course, our newly appointed trustee, the brilliant Professor Jill Pell, who's an expert in public health at the University of Glasgow, is leading a study in collaboration with Public Health Scotland and the NHS in Scotland to look at long COVID and help us better understand the longer term impact it has on thousands of people. And not only that, but for our 60th birthday celebrations, Jill has also been spending her time getting a bunch of researchers and their families to ride a whopping 60 kilometres, calling themselves the Tour de Research. And she's done a phenomenal job at rallying the troops to raise over £18,000 to date. So thank you to Jill and the team. And of course, as ever, our focus remains on patients and those people affected by heart and circulatory diseases in Scotland. And BHF Scotland's new heart disease strategy was launched in February this year, and many of the priorities that we helped identify with your support have now been adopted in the Scottish Government's newly published Heart Disease Action Plan. And this will help us better tackle the burden of non-communicable diseases, just like heart disease, cancer and stroke. And to turn to our income for a moment that powers everything we do, I had the absolute pleasure of visiting some of our shops and stores in Dundee last month, and it was an absolute joy to be back in Scotland and also spending time with our brilliant retail colleagues and volunteers. They've demonstrating nothing short of brilliant resilience over the last year. They've had to close and open shops more times than they'd care to, and their resilience and determination to get back up and trading in a COVID-safe way has been phenomenal and is continuing to raise much needed funds for our vital research. So well done to everybody in our retail team. And to fundraising, equally, our team have done a phenomenal job of finding new ways to fundraise, to stay connected with our brilliant supporters. And I had the pleasure of joining in our virtual kilt walk last March, and we weren't in Scotland, my Scottish husband and I, but we donned our kilts and joined in from afar. And it really demonstrated to me just how much hard work has gone into strengthening relationships with our supporters who, despite COVID, found creative ways to get involved and to stay connected with us. And that event raised over £45,000 for the BHF in Scotland. And for me, it was a real signal at the bedrock of our community fundraising and the support and vital success it has, alongside support from the Scottish Government, Scottish companies and our major donors, of course. So as we celebrate our 60th birthday, of course our work is not done, with cardiovascular disease remaining one of the world's biggest killers. And although we are 60 years young, we still have so very much to do. But I want to take this moment to thank you for always being there for us. We simply could not have achieved everything we've done to help so many millions of people without you. So you're all amazing, and I hope you'll join me in wishing the BHF a very happy birthday.
Hello, I'm Richard Forsyth. I'm the Health Systems Insight Manager for BHF Scotland, and I've been working with the BHF for about 10 years now, and I'd just like to pass you to Frances.
Hi there, I'm Frances Divers. I've worked in the NHS for many a year, probably over 40 years. I've been involved in cardiac rehab for a long time as well. I was lead nurse from Scottish Government for Clinical Champion for Cardiac Rehab for over the past 5 years, and I retired from the NHS in January this year.
Thanks, Frances. So yeah, I mean, we met each other a good few years ago, actually. I think the first time we met was during the filming of the Heart E modules, where you had to pretend I had chest pain, and you did a consultation with me, then you filmed me get an exercise tolerance test as well, and probably one of the hottest days of the summer over at St John's in Livingston. But as you said, Franz, you've had a very successful career in the NHS, spanning, I'll not say a few decades, a couple of decades, supporting patients, you say, with heart and circulatory disease predominantly in your career. So what would you say has been the kind of biggest changes you've seen in patient care kind of since you started, up to before you retired?
Well, as you say, Richard, I've been involved in cardiac rehab for a long, long time, and within that time, there's been lots of different changes within cardiac rehabilitation. I mean, if you think, you probably don't know, but I can go back to the time when patients were actually nursed in bed for a couple of weeks, and then their care after it, they would just have gradual mobilisation afterwards, which took patients a long time to recover from actually their heart attack or their cardiac surgery. Do you think about modern day life? I mean, our patients now can be discharged in the same day or a couple of days after their heart attack. So cardiac rehab has had to reflect and make changes as investigation and treatment for heart disease or circulatory disease has advanced. However, I think for me, the biggest change really has been around the modernisation agenda that the Scottish Government set off. If you can remember, the 2014 action plan set out a priority for cardiac rehabilitation, and basically it said cardiac rehabilitation had to modernise. Now, what did that actually mean? You had a blank canvas to modernise cardiac rehabilitation. Because up until that point, we followed a very traditional model of cardiac rehabilitation, and it was generally a one-size-fits-all of exercise and education, where the vision for cardiac rehab that was set out alongside the action plan stated that all patients who were referred to cardiac rehab should have an assessment and have a treatment plan set out that would fall out the back of that assessment. So instead of it being a one-size-fits-all, it was around a very individualised approach. So for me, that was the biggest change. And as lead nurse for Scotland for cardiac rehab, I felt very privileged and honoured to be able to lead that work. However, we knew that work wasn't going to be, changes weren't going to happen overnight. So it was about making very small changes to make small steps to make small changes, basically, so that we could work towards a much more an assessment needs model rather than the old traditional model. So for me, that's been the biggest change in cardiac rehabilitation, and it's a change that will benefit patients in future for the future comings.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you talk about the personalisation agenda, because I think even since you've retired, and obviously with the pandemic, we've been doing a lot of work, as you know, across the UK, and a lot of the teams it's almost taken like the pandemic to get them thinking about that more personalised approach. As you say, many services were still kind of almost in that historic mode of delivery where it was group-based education and exercise. It almost seems kind of incomprehensible, the fact, as you say, that people were advised for bed rest for a few weeks, whereas you say now they are very much, they've had their surgery or they've had their diagnosis, their medications are titrated, they're up, they're about, and they're almost getting back to kind of normal life, as you say, kind of quite quickly after the event or diagnosis. Cardiac rehab is something that we are both really passionate about. Why do you think it is such a vital part of the patient's recovery?
Well, it's more vital now probably than what it was all the years ago. And if you think about cardiac rehab, it depends what you actually mean by cardiac rehabilitation. And I think that's a bigger question or a bigger discussion to be had. Now, up until now, there's been a lot of benefits cited for like patient satisfaction, around exercise, around decreased hospital admissions. So there's a lot of benefits cited for cardiac rehabilitation, but patients have changed, medicine has changed, treatments have changed. And if you think now, I mean, as I said earlier, patients can be discharged from hospital within a day and a half to 2 days after having, say, a heart attack. What information that's provided in hospital within that time is very, very limited, but also what the patient actually takes in is very, very limited within that time, because you can have somebody that's had a heart attack, they're told their diagnosis, they're told they're on 5 medications, they're told not to drive. All that information is just huge for a patient to take in. So generally, cardiac rehabilitation, or the practitioners in cardiac rehabilitation, are probably the first people that even speak to the patient after discharge. So it's very important at that stage that the patients are contacted very, very early to answer questions and that the patients may have, and to provide some sort of reassurance, but positivity as well, that the patient's going to get back to doing lots of things that they were doing. So personally, I feel patients do deserve cardiac. I think every patient that goes through that has a heart event should be seen by a cardiac rehabilitation practitioner that is competent in giving the patients that information. However, I think if we talk about cardiac rehab and that experience, if it has to be a positive experience for the patient, it has to be effective. And again, going back to that traditional model is no longer, it should never be applied to patients now, because every patient is individual and they've got individual needs. So every patient should deserve at least an assessment of some type, so that then a plan can be put in place for that person. But that plan has to be individualised, and it's not around that one size fits all anymore. You know, we can see patients at clinic. We can actually discharge patients from a clinic appointment, from a first assessment consultation, because a lot of the times these patients don't need to go any further. But there are some patients that maybe just need a wee bit of help, need a wee bit of, maybe we need to refer them on to other agencies outside the NHS, like leisure. And indeed, there are a group of patients that actually need much more intensive or complex cardiac rehab intervention. So cardiac rehab is around having a variable or various pathways in place to support every individual patient. So yeah, I do think cardiac rehab is important. I think it's completely different to what it was years ago, but I think as practitioners, we need to move forward to help support these individual patients.
Hi, I'm Annie Cunningham and I'm the Regional Manager for Home Stores here in the North. I'd like to talk you through a timeline of our BHF retail. In 1987, Dorothy and Anne trialled the first BHF shop in Leicester with a small loan. They're trying to see if they can raise funds through retail for life-saving research. Glad to say that went very well, and by 1991 we already have 43 shops. In 1990, we start bank collections and we start handing donation bags out in our shops and stores so that customers can hand in at their leisure. In 1995, the first shop in Scotland opens, and that's Glenrothes Standard Store. Then we have 1997, where we start selling new goods purchased by our buyers in our stores. In 2000, we start taking card payments and move a bit more forward in the technology front. And in 2001, our first home store opens, that's in Sittingbourne. Pleased to say that in 2005, our first store in Scotland, our first home store opens, and that's in Edinburgh. We then have 2006, where a huge jump forward, we start selling stock on eBay. The eBay store is born above our Halifax store, above our Halifax shop, and that's where eBay, the first eBay site takes place. In 2008, we moved to an electronic stock system, and that allows us to start tracking stock and making sure we've got for the customer what stock, what they want, and where they want to have it. And we kick off our hugely successful gift aid scheme. In 2009, we actually moved to computerised tills, which doesn't seem too far ago, but what a difference that would make in terms of technology for our shops and stores. In 2011, we moved to an eBay site in Leeds, and that allows us to sell our first donated car, and that's just hugely exciting for us here. In 2015, we have our first branded vans on the road, and we have branded vans in all of our home stores across Scotland, and that makes a huge difference to what people see in the towns and cities and villages near to them. So that's hugely exciting for home stores. 2017, we go contactless in terms of card machines. And in 2018, we opened our first home and fashion store. So we start combining the two fascias into one huge site, which is hugely popular with our customers. In 2020, just before we go into lockdown and the current pandemic, we moved to a larger site in eBay, which will open up, again, more opportunity to sell on eBay and sell more products. As it stands today, we now have 76 stores across Scotland, which is a mix of home stores and standards. So that takes you on a bit of a journey of our retail sites, and it makes you wonder, you know, at 60 years old, the retail business is only in its early 30s, so a very young business which has come really far. So it's hugely exciting for us, and where will we be in the next 60 years? Who knows, but certainly if it keeps going the way it's going, it'll be a really exciting place to be part of. I think every day for me, I am humbled at what we do and what we achieve here at BHF. You know, listening to people's stories, seeing and hearing what happens to the funds that we raise within retail and within the BHF. I think it really, the effect that it has on people, just it lets us see that we truly do make a difference. So it takes what I love doing, which is being a retailer, but the end result is just, it's unquantifiable for me. You know, what we do with that money we raise here at BHF is just, it's something I can't see myself doing anything differently now. It is amazing to just be part of it, and just to say, truly humbling. It makes us as retailers want to give more of ourselves and just do more and give more. Last year, retail forecast a profit of £21 million, and we had an actual loss of £36 million. So if you take that in circa, you know, we're talking between 55 and 60 million pounds of loss during this pandemic, which is why we need you guys, and we appreciate you guys so much, because we need you to keep giving. And whether that's your time, your stock, raising cash for us, you know, we just need more. We've come so far in the retail journey, but there is so much more to do, and I just can't wait to be part of that.
Hello, I am Les from the Perth F&E store. I have been 5 years with the charity. To be honest, I never had a connection with the store before I came here, and I got a job placement from the job centre, and from there I progressed to paid work. Volunteering gave me a purpose and a goal in life, because I had personal issues to deal with. Then I applied for a paid job. When I got this job, I was very happy and enjoyed my role very much. The team in the Perth shop are all one big happy family. Unfortunately, after a year, I suffered a heart attack at work, and I experienced the charity at its very best. After my heart attack, I had 2 stents fitted and received a lot of leaflets and information from branded British Heart Foundation leaflets in the hospital. Unfortunately, I come back to work and I was not able to continue in my role in the warehouse. I had to come back to the store as a volunteer, which I still do, and I'm here 5 days a week, sometimes 7, and in a customer rules service. And thank you.
Hiya, my name's Margaret Smith. I'm an assistant manager with the F&E store in Dumbarton Road in Partick. I've been with the Heart Foundation for about 3.5 years now. All my working life was spent in retail, and I never ever gave the charity sector a second thought. It was just nothing that was on my radar at all. Unfortunately, my gran passed away. She had an existing heart condition, and then she passed away with chronic heart failure. Round about that same time, I was actually looking for a new job because I'd been made redundant. And a couple of days after her passing, actually, the BHF job came up, and I thought, oh, is this a sign? So I read up about all the work that BHF do, read into it, and just thought it was something that I could commit to, something that was worthwhile. So I applied, I got the job, and basically I haven't looked back since then. It's just a fantastic job. Every day I meet volunteers, customers, donors. They all have their own stories. Some of them are heartbreaking, some of them are funny reasons, but just wee stories that they share with their kind of loved ones. So that, it sounds cheesy, but it does make coming to work feel rewarding. Unfortunately, while I was working with Heart Foundation, my mum suffered several strokes and she passed away. But I had absolutely amazing support from my BHF family, and that's what we are, we're a family. We all support one another, and that's right up to Annie, James, all our volunteers, all my colleagues. We are a family, we're a team, we support one another. So all that support kind of reaffirms my commitment to help making a difference. Working here, I've got back much more than I could ever give, and I just feel that knowing every single day that every penny we put in the till, every 1p we put in that till is a penny closer to helping people have a future, and that's amazing. It gives people a future with their families. It helps children have a prolonged life, a happy life. So, as I say, it's just an amazing place to work. It's so rewarding, and we couldn't do it without our volunteers. We couldn't do it without our customers. We couldn't do it without our donors. That's all I can really say. To come to work, having worked in retail for so long, and you feel as if you're lining the pockets of a tycoon and buying him another yacht or something, to actually be coming here and actually help save a life is just absolutely fantastic. That's why we all do it, from the very top to the very bottom. That's why we do it, and it's just amazing. And I want to say thank you to everyone that supports the Heart Foundation. Thank you.
Hello again. It was hugely inspiring for me to hear about the improvements in care and treatment of heart disease patients, and to hear such moving stories from Les and Mags about why BHF is so important to them and the BHF family that I think they and we are all part of. Now it's time to move on to hear some more about successes from our policy and public affairs team and our amazing fundraisers up and down the country, before we finally hear about research and patient progress from Professor Nick Mills. So I'm pleased firstly to introduce my colleague, David McColgan.
Hi, my name is David McColgan. I'm the Senior Policy and Public Affairs Manager here at the British Heart Foundation. I support the policy and influencing function across the 3 devolved nations of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. In terms of the BHF, we're 60 years young this year. However, policy and influence is a relatively new function to the BHF, and there's a number of reasons for that I'll take you through today. The socio-economic and cultural environment that we all live in has a huge impact on our lives, and that includes our health. Our views on smoking, exercise, diet and our perceptions of disease are influenced every day by multinational corporations, healthcare systems, our friends and our family. But much like our views on how to treat patients have changed since 1961, so too do our views on norms and laws. The purpose of the policy and influencing team is to take an evidence-based approach to tackling norms and changing old or proposing new law changes to help our health and support better health in Scotland and across the UK. The introduction of devolution in the UK in 1999 created a huge opportunity to influence for change. Prior to 1999, all health policy was delivered through Westminster. But in 1999, with the re-establishment of the Scottish Parliament, the introduction of the Welsh Assembly and the Northern Irish Assembly being established in Belfast, gave the BHF a new opportunity to look at more localised laws, more laws and changes applicable to those nations. In Scotland, we saw immediate impact on that opportunity. The Public Health Act in 2006, which was a piece of legislation that introduced the ban on smoking in public places, was a first step to realising the power of change within public health. Not long after Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England would introduce the legislation. And actually, from a Scottish perspective, we saw a 17% reduction in heart attacks in the first year of that legislation alone. That showed the power of legislation, it showed the power of change, and it showed how we can use devolution within the BHF to drive change across the whole of the UK. The British Heart Foundation Scotland has a long pedigree of driving change within a parliamentary setting. And it's change that will have profound impact on people's lives for the better in Scotland. Some of those examples that have happened since 1999 include the banning of cigarette vending machines. That happened very soon after the Public Health Act in 2006, and that was a real watershed moment for the tobacco control lobby in Scotland. In 2013, we introduced the banning of smoking in cars when children are present. This was a major moment again within the public health campaign in Scotland on tobacco control. And we've already seen evidence that this is driving a reduction in young people being admitted to hospital with respiratory and cardiac issues. Most recently, in 2019, the Scottish Parliament passed legislation to introduce opt-out organ donation in Scotland. This was a campaign that I've been involved in for 5 years. It was a campaign that was very close to my heart. My father-in-law passed away waiting on a lung transplant. But BHF was really the leading voice on this in Scotland and across the UK, where the legislation was first passed in Wales in 2015. But in Scotland, it took us 5 years of building the evidence, building the case, working with parliamentarians like Anne McTaggart MSP, Mark Griffin MSP, Kenny Gibson MSP, John Mason MSP, who are all strong champions for that change. And eventually in June 2019, the Scottish Parliament passed the legislation, and that system is now in operation across the whole of Scotland. We know for people with conditions such as cardiomyopathies, severe heart failure, that often a transplant is their best chance of survival or their only chance of survival. And we know from international evidence that opt-out organ donation systems ensure that people within that country have a more positive view on organ donation and are more likely to donate after death. And we hope that will have a transformational change on organ donation in Scotland, and we'll be watching with a keen eye over the coming years. So whilst the policy and influencing function at the British Heart Foundation has had huge successes across a whole range of areas, not all of our successes are legislative. One of the purposes of the policy and influencing function is to work alongside the Scottish Government to drive change both within our clinical system and in other areas of policy. One of our most high-profile successes was our Nation of Lifesavers campaign that worked with all 32 local authorities in Scotland to ensure that all pupils will be trained in CPR before they leave secondary school. This campaign was highly innovative. It was multi-award winning, and essentially what it did was work with each individual local authority to gain a commitment from them through their education department to ensure that their schools will deliver CPR training to their pupils before they leave school. That CPR training can be delivered by third sector organisations, statutory bodies like the ambulance service or the fire brigade, or it could be delivered by teachers themselves. The programme was designed to allow full flexibility with local authorities and how they deliver the programme, but gain that commitment to ensure that all pupils are trained in CPR before they leave school. We started the campaign in March 2018, and April 2019, a year later, saw us make the announcement that all 32 local authorities had committed to ensuring that all pupils were trained in CPR. Now, pupils trained in CPR is great, but that actually equates to around 50,000 new people every single year in Scotland trained in CPR. In 10 years, that'll be 10% of the population. And the reason we launched that campaign was we learned from international examples like Denmark and Seattle and Norway, where they've got really high rates of survival from cardiac arrest. And one of the reasons for that is they have a young mobile population who are trained in CPR. So we were delighted to work with all local authorities in Scotland. We were delighted to engage with their education departments and their schools and gain that commitment in 2019. And I think that will deliver a real sea change in our attitudes towards CPR. It will deliver a sea change in how we view cardiac arrest and how we take that challenge forward to improve survival rates in Scotland. A more recent success that we've had working with Scottish Government, and delighted it came in our 60th birthday year, was in February 2021, so this year, we launched a draft strategy for tackling heart disease in Scotland. It was a product of 2 years' work at the British Heart Foundation, working with over 70 clinicians, 25 patients, and a whole range of stakeholders to identify what the challenges over the next 5 to 10 years are for heart disease in Scotland, and publishing a document that we asked the Scottish Government to commit to adopting and commit to delivering. And on the 23rd of March this year, we were delighted that the Scottish Government published their heart disease action plan that included all of the recommendations from our report. So that's a really short run through of the history of policy and influencing at the BHF from a Scottish perspective. The Scottish Parliament is only 20 years young. We've got great opportunities on the horizon to look at the prevention agenda around tobacco control, around tackling obesity, overweight and diet in Scotland. We've got huge clinical challenges, but also huge opportunities with a workforce that is passionate about delivering better outcomes for patients. And the British Heart Foundation is committed to working alongside stakeholder organisations like Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament, working alongside the clinical community, our patients, and driving an evidence-based approach to improving the health of the people of Scotland.
Good evening. Welcome to the Scotland Fundraising presentation segment for tonight. For those of you on the call that haven't met me before, my name's April Davidson and I lead the fundraising managers for Scotland. We work with corporate partners, fundraising groups, volunteers, clubs, associations. On the call, I've got the team with me today, so over to Laura.
I'm Laura and I'm the fundraising manager in Glasgow and the west of Scotland.
Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay and I'm the fundraising manager for the north, central and southwest of Scotland.
And I'm Claire and I'm the fundraising manager in the east of Scotland and the Islands.
This last year has actually been quite special for the British Heart Foundation, despite all the adversity. When we were asked as a team to present back today, the team and I struggled just to pick out one or two highlights. So in true fundraising form, we compiled a short video that creates a snapshot of the brilliant support out there. Thank you, BHF Scotland. On behalf of myself, my team, here are some of your best bits.
What? We're Team Cats, we want 100 Team
When you're dressing up, still it's not enough. Who you trying to impress, man?
Jared, I'm raising some money for the British Heart Foundation by doing monthly fitness challenges. What are you going to do?
You're caught up in the past, show you living fast. You're talking, but he's walking. I can't help but let it be someone. Try to be someone. Money and the cars don't make you a star. But all you got is talking, you're looking kinda lost. Try to be someone. Try to be someone. Try to be someone. Try to be someone. Try to be
We were the Fundraising in the Community Heart Hero Award winners in 2020. We've been fundraising for about 3 years. In 3 years we've raised over £50,000 for BHF, doing events like golf days, bowling days and race nights. It's an honour and a privilege to raise money for BHF in memory of Paul.
You're talking, but ain't walking. I can't help but let it be someone. Try to 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 be someone.
We are the Lewis and Harrison branch of the British Heart Foundation, and during COVID we've run a number of virtual events including a dog show, a Christmas tree competition and currently a raffle to celebrate 60 years of the British Heart Foundation.
Thank you to every single one of you. We simply couldn't do what we do without you.
So incredible work, effort and inspiration. Thank you all so much. We really couldn't do it without you. Now, some of you on the call might be thinking, oh, I kind of want more ideas and maybe I do want to get more involved. Well, I'm now going to pass you over to the team and they can tell you some snippets of how you can get involved.
So here are some quick and easy things you could do to help the Scotland fundraising team. Are you on social media? Could you share some of our posts? It helps to widen our audience. Could you tell us your story? What motivates and inspires you? We'd love to hear from you.
So like Claire mentioned, there's so many different ways that you can support the BHF. Relatively simple fundraising ideas such as hosting an office bake-off, a Wear It Red to Work day, or even planning a family and friends fundraising raffle are all simple yet effective ways to fundraise. Other ways to support could include volunteering in your spare time, sharing your story to help us raise awareness, or if you're having a clear out, why not donate your unwanted stock to a local shop? However you choose to get involved, we'll be delighted to have you on board, and Team Scotland will be here to support you every step of the way.
Or why not set yourself a bigger fundraising challenge and get all of your family and friends involved too? Are you an adventurous type? Why not try some Munro bagging or tackle Ben Nevis or maybe even the West Highland Way? Afraid of heights or not, as the case may be? What about a skydive? You could do it with your friends or get your pals to sponsor you if they won't take on the challenge. You could look at hosting an event. With all of the lovely weather that we've been having, what about a garden party or a barbecue? Or get yourself ready for the festive season with a wreath-making evening or Christmas craft night. Scotland's Kilt Walk is currently open for registration, and we're looking for fabulous kilted heroes to join Team BHF. It's taking place on the 26th of September in Glasgow. We would love you to be involved. Or if you're a competitive bunch, book yourself a night at the pub for a pub quiz night or race night and get all your pals together to celebrate after lockdown. Give yourself a target, give us a shout, pencil in a virtual copper with one of us, and we are here to help you every step of the way. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for such an incredible year. As April said at the start, it's been quite a year and there's been lots going on that has disrupted your fundraising plans. But your dedication and passion to BHF Scotland has inspired and humbled us the whole year long. You are a bunch of absolute superstars. We cannot wait to see what you do in the next 12 months.
Thank you for inviting me to join the celebrations. I am the British Heart Foundation Professor of Cardiology at the University of Edinburgh, Nick Mills, and I wanted to take a little time today to reflect on what we've achieved in Scotland over the last 60 years together with the British Heart Foundation. Our research group evaluates diagnostic tests for heart attacks, and our aim is to improve the care and outcomes of the people of Scotland by introducing these into clinical practice. I usually like to start by asking the audience where they think this photograph might have been taken, but in this virtual world, I'll just have to answer it myself, which this is the entrance to the Royal Infirmary Emergency Department, taken around 100 years ago. Now, at that time, heart attacks were considered to be rare in clinical practice. In fact, in the 8,863 records from the hospital that year, there were only thought to be 5 cases. Exactly 100 years later, this analysis from researchers in Dundee was published, in which Glasgow, the city I was born and raised in, was declared to be the coronary heart disease capital of the world. So what changed since those times? Well, the introduction of effective diagnostic tests has changed the way we classify disease from one based on symptoms to one that recognises the need to define the presence and extent of diseases, enabled by really important developments in biomarkers and cardiac imaging, which I'd like to talk a little bit about. So our research began with the publication of the first global definition of a heart attack, which aimed to standardise care across the world. The diagnosis of heart attack is made when we detect evidence of injury to the heart muscle using a blood test in persons who have symptoms, angina, or abnormalities on their electrocardiogram. And in most patients, we confirm the diagnosis with additional imaging studies. During the years that followed this publication, there have been some really important improvements in the way the blood test that we use to diagnose a heart attack. Troponin is a protein that is released from the heart following injury. In contrast to previous tests, it can differentiate between heart injury from any type of muscle injury. And really importantly, improvements in sensitivity of the test allowed us to use lower thresholds to diagnose heart attacks. A decade ago, we demonstrated that just introducing this more sensitive test, troponin test, into clinical practice improved survival by 50% in those patients who had been admitted to hospital with small, previously unrecognised and unreported increases in cardiac troponin. These improvements were due to better treatment. Now, the next generation of high sensitivity assays now allow us to measure troponin in everyone, whether they're having a heart attack or not, which enabled us for the first time to really define what normal was and to develop new applications for this test to move beyond diagnosis to assess risk and predict future heart attacks. We're the first country in the world to have access to this test, and our first observation was that troponin levels are different in men and women. And by enrolling consecutive patients with chest pain to the Royal Infirmary, we demonstrated for the first time that the use of a single threshold for diagnosing a heart attack led to unsystematic underdiagnosis of heart attacks in women. And by using sex-specific normal reference ranges, the same proportion of men and women presenting to hospital with suspected heart attacks are diagnosed with heart attacks. We became the first country in the world to recommend the use of sex-specific thresholds, and I'm pleased to say that the international definition of a heart attack has been updated to recommend that approach also. Now, from a single study, we've now enrolled more than 80,000 people across Scotland in 10 hospitals. Chest pain remains the most common presentation to hospital. It's the most common reason for unscheduled admission to the hospital. And we demonstrated that by using these tests, we can identify patients who do not have a heart attack earlier. That allows them to get home rather than be admitted to hospital. And by implementing these rapid pathways across Scotland, we reduced the length of stay by over 4 hours in the emergency department and increased the proportion of patients who were able to get home by more than 50%. And crucially, by using routine data and following them up for over a year, we demonstrate that this accelerated care did not result in harm and that this approach was safe. So, have outcomes following a heart attack for the people of Scotland changed? Well, since 1990, 500,000 persons in Scotland have had a heart attack. As a consequence of earlier diagnosis, access to earlier, more effective treatment, outcomes have improved. Crucially, survival following admission following a heart attack has improved from a mortality rate of 22% to 12% during that time. These sunburst plots show you the outcomes for the average 65-year-old over the last 25 years and what happens to them 3 years after admission to hospital. So the risk of heart failure has also fallen, but a significant morbidity remains with recurrent hospitalisation due to bleeding, stroke and further heart attacks. I'm absolutely delighted to say that Scotland no longer has the highest rates of heart attack in the world or even in the UK. We've made real progress over the last 25 years in the provision of preventative therapies that reduce cholesterol. This is across all age groups in Scotland. Reduce blood pressure and smoking rates have fallen dramatically. But the impact of obesity and diabetes is rising and progress is stalled. Although there are fewer heart attacks, the levels have fallen off and are now flat over the last 5 years. And I guess our concern is that the longer-term impact of obesity and diabetes will see a rise in heart attacks in Scotland again. As such, a significant proportion of our research has now focused on the prevention of heart attacks. Here too, we've demonstrated that improved access to diagnostic testing, here with a CT scan of the heart arteries, can reduce the risk of hospitalisation or death from a heart attack by helping us to target preventative treatments to those that are going to benefit most. This is work presented just this week at the European Society of Cardiology conference by Doreen Kim and I, who has shown that in apparently healthy persons living in the community, that repeated measures of the same test we use to diagnose a heart attack can help us identify those patients that are more likely to die from a heart attack in the future, raising the possibility that we could extend testing with troponin and with CT coronary angiography to identify high-risk persons who we could target our preventative therapy more effectively to, in order to continue to try and reduce the burden of heart attacks in Scotland. We're currently running trials in Scotland to try and tackle this question. Target is enrolling patients that present to the hospital with chest pain in whom we rule out a heart attack, but we find that their troponin levels are intermediate. They're not low, they're not reassuring. And we're randomizing these individuals who haven't had a heart attack to routine care with a CT angiogram of their heart arteries or to standard care in order to try and target preventative therapy more effectively. And I'm delighted to say that we enrolled our 1,000th patient to this trial just last week. So whilst there have been 60 years of progress in the care of people with heart disease and heart attacks, this condition remains the main cause of death in Scotland, and we still have lots to do. I'd just like to finish by thanking you for your attention and to the British Heart Foundation for their support. And I look forward to the discussion where I'd be delighted to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Nick, April, and her team. And most importantly, to all our fundraisers in that film and all of you who fundraised and supported BHF who are joining us here this evening. It's you who make that work happen. It's you who've made us able to make the progress that Professor Mills just described. Now, before I take any questions you have for us, I wanted to play you a message from someone who wants to wish BHF a happy 60th birthday.
Hi, my name is Graeme Souness. I'm an ambassador for the BHF. It's our 60th birthday. This is just a short message to thank everyone, all the people who work their socks off and for all the generous donations that you people give. It's still the biggest killer in Scotland. We're continually finding new ways to treat this and new medicines and different surgeries. So a big thank you to everyone who's donated money, to everyone who continues to help us, and maybe we'll all catch up on a real dinner one night and have a drink. Cheers.
For any of you not football fans, that was Graeme Souness, a long-time BHF ambassador, former Scotland football captain, and played for Liverpool amongst many other clubs. Some of you might have seen he spoke powerfully and movingly about heart conditions around the events that happened at Euro 2020 at the football in the summer, which so dramatically drew attention to the importance of CPR and defibrillators across Scotland and across the rest of the world. But now I wanted to take a few moments just to ask Professor Mills some questions, who, if he joins us now, you'll notice has dramatically changed clothing since about 4 minutes ago, in that was a pre-recorded session, and he's joining us from his office today. So hi, Nick.
Hi, James.
It was fantastic to hear the progress that you recounted in that presentation. And earlier on, we heard about the changes in the last 60 years for patients recovering in terms of cardiac rehab and how that's become a much more personalised and individualised approach. And a lot of what you were describing seemed to be indicating a more personalised assessment of risk and a more personalised approach to prevention. Is that a direction you can see more advances being made in the future?
Absolutely. I think we've been through a huge amount in the last 60 years in terms of our understanding of disease and the treatments that we have available. But there are some things that we haven't, I think, made as much progress on yet. So the way that we screen for heart disease and try and identify those who benefit best from treatment is still predicated fundamentally on risk models that were derived 40 years ago to estimate for the population risk. And I think with biomarkers of heart muscle disease, really greater availability of very quick and excellent diagnostic tests like CT scans, we can identify those who have subclinical or silent disease much more effectively than guesstimating based on an algorithm and get the right treatments to the right people. And I think that'll make a huge impact on continuing to reduce the rates of heart attacks in Scotland. And that very much is about personalising or individualising treatment rather than saying everyone over the age of 50 should take a statin because that is the cheapest way to reduce heart attacks. I think we want to give people choice, and we want to, be a little more personal in our approach to prevention.
Fantastic. I wonder, looking ahead to the next 60 years, what kinds of things, what kinds of progress do you think we might make in trying to tackle heart disease? We've seen this fantastic progress in the last 60 years, but what do you think is possible in the next 60?
I think every generation thinks that what we do now is the best it could ever be. There's always isn't it wonderful what we're doing now? But if I reflect back when I first trained in cardiology at the old Royal Infirmary and the old coronary care unit there, which was set up 60 years ago by a former British Heart Foundation professor, the first coronary care unit in the world, we've come on a huge way. I'm on call for the coronary care unit this week, and I've mainly, thankfully, spent the week talking to patients and their families about their future rather than treating disasters, because the treatment pathways are now so excellent. So I think that the systems that we put in place, rapid access chest pain clinics, treadmills, outpatient activity in coronary care units, were designed 30, 40 years ago. And we have a big opportunity with technology and digital platforms to think a little bit about how we deliver care to patients using different approaches that are perhaps more patient-centric than waiting 3 months to see a cardiologist about an episode of pain. We have an opportunity, I think, to redesign services and make them more effective. The big areas that we need to work on, I think heart attacks we're doing really well. We've seen structural heart disease, which used to be only treatable by major cardiac surgery, increasingly delivered by keyhole techniques. And I think that is going to expand to be able to treat all sorts of things amazingly in the future. We probably even haven't dreamt up half of them at this stage. There's always innovation in heart disease, and so I think that's going to be really important. I also think that the BHF, working with the Scottish Government and researchers in Scotland, have a huge role to play in understanding the burden of disease using routine data. And I think we haven't really seen the opportunity to use routinely collected data in the health service in order to really understand what we need to prioritise for the next 60 years. And there's a really big opportunity there, which the BHF Scotland, working with the Scottish Government and other organisations, can really drive forward.
Fantastic, thank you, Nick. And one last question, not to put you on the spot, but I wonder, for those of us joining the call today, supporters who've contributed pounds and pence and time and donations and clothing to our charity shops and volunteered in them and worked right across the charity. What does the BHF support mean to you in terms of how it's enabled and supported your career to make some of the advances you've talked about?
It's the most important thing to me and to our research group. It's more important than our health service at our university. It feels like part of a family. I've worked with the BHF on so many really interesting and important projects over such a long period. The BHF, without the BHF, it's difficult to imagine what cardiac services would be like in the UK. It supports frontline health professionals, nurses delivering care, right the way through to doing the research that's going to hopefully change practice for the good for everyone in Scotland. And without the BHF, we would not have made anywhere near as much progress as we have over the last 60 years. Apologies, we had a helicopter landing on the hospital roof.
Well, for all of those watching, if you need reassurance that this part of our evening is live and that Nick generally is at the ERI, then there's reassurance there as a helicopter lands on the helipad, I presume. If you have to rush off, please do. That's the last of the questions I wanted to ask you. It was just to thank you, Nick, for joining us this evening and your presentation and explaining so clearly about the progress we're making and how knowledge and understanding is really helping translate into patient benefit. I think that's so important for all of us to hear. So thank you very much for all your work and joining us this evening. I just wanted to close us up now by saying how proud I am of all that we've achieved, how proud I am of all the people on this call who've been part of that. But with your continued efforts, we think and we know we can do so much more. Our research has helped change and save lives, but there's still so much more to do, and we have goals for the next decade that are even more ambitious. We want a cure for heart failure. We want many, many more people to survive a heart attack, and better treatments for stroke and ways to prevent vascular dementia. With your help, we'll continue to fund groundbreaking research, backing the best ideas, the brightest minds, and the biggest ambitions to change lives here in Scotland. A world of cures and treatments that we think is out there that we can't imagine today. So thank you so much for giving up of your time tonight. If you're a fundraiser, a scientist, a colleague, someone who's living with a heart condition, or someone who's lost someone special to one too, thank you to all of you. Happy 60th birthday, BHF, from all of us to all of you.